all learning shuts down at the school. They are supposedly measuring what you have learned, but they're not teaching you anything new. So in my observations in the past 15 years of what's been going on in public schools, that 6 days has grown to 540 days, and 540 days equals 3 years. And yeah, it's unbelievable. And what do I hear at the university? Probably you at Gateway. I'm hearing these kids can't read, these kids can't write, these kids don't know enough math. And why? I'm looking at it, the average high school graduate has lost 3 years of learning to either taking the test, preparing for the test, practicing for the test. And that's a massive amount of time. And one piece of data that is important, because I'm a data junkie. I don't just feel things. Yes. I look at the facts. Our 2015 NAEP scores and our SAT scores and our 2012s and 2009s have shown high school students who have not scored this low in over 30 years. So there's a direct correlation. The kids aren't stupid, but if I take away 3 years of your learning, that explains a lot. So that's why it's fight for 6. I'm saying we want accountability, but let's fight for the same accountability that I had, that you had, Tom.
And you mentioned when we were kind of chatting prior to kind of coming on the air about what you've just mentioned, Jesse, pertains to education reform and equity and justice in public schools.
Sure. When we think about equity in our public schools, first thing I think we have to acknowledge that from day one, our public schools in this nation were not equitable places. So we have the first Secretary of Education, Horace Mann, who is often considered the father of public education. And Horace visited every single school. He was the commissioner of Massachusetts Public Schools. Over a 6-year period, he visited 6,000 schools on horse. Every day he would visit a school and take meticulous notes. Are the windows good? Is the heater in the room good? Are the books good? Are the chairs comfortable? He took meticulous notes. And in the evening, get this, he would lecture in the town on the tenets of public education. And he would stay at one of the town residents' homes and eat with them. Now, what happens at the end of that 6 years? Well, Horace Mann reported that what he noticed in these 6,000 schools, a vast inequity. So when we look at that, I'm saying that was the beginning of public schools. We've never had equity in our public schools. Black, brown, special education children, immigrant children, poor children. We understand that the system was created to uplift the wealthy. And we did that by eventually hooking into that property tax model. So we know where Donald Trump lives. If there is a public school, and I'm sure his children don't attend one, but if there is one, Tom, I can guarantee you it's a kick-butt public school. Not like the one that I went to in Jersey City, New Jersey at all.
Jesse, let's just rewind that a little bit, because some folks might think that we're just dealing with a rhetorical issue or just a philosophical issue, but you referenced earlier your data collection and your really analysis of the facts. So let's paraphrase what you just said in terms of the inequities, and let me just give you another chance to elaborate on that in a different way.
All right, so one of the things we know that, for instance, we've been laboring under some form of No Child Left Behind. That was a shift in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The old act used to require research to measure success, but the monies were given to provide tutors to children in poor community, math tutors, reading tutors, special education teachers. And when NCLB came out, it was a massive shift. It promised equity through new testing and more rigorous standards. And I always laugh because when you say rigorous, let's go to we look at rigor, that means dead. That means, that is not good. So what are we doing? But research had shown, I fought this testified while the bill was being considered, that this would be a disastrous effect on children, particularly children of color, and particularly poor children, and particularly special education children. Because the more you emphasize high stakes assessments, the more your discipline problems increase, the more identification of special education children, and the higher your dropout rates go. And right now, I think if we just listen to the news come alive about
Mhm.
public schools,
Mhm.
the discipline issues, they're everywhere.
Mhm.
If you were a child and you were taking 8 to 12 weeks of your school year, was taking some kind of computerized, base standardized test, the whole school shuts down, the tension, the nerves were, heck, it was 2 days for me in elementary school, Tom. So, yeah, and we're forgetting about one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
None of this is culturally relevant.
Mm.
This is putting knowledge in an isolated fashion. So I'll give you an example.
Mhm.
And I think it was 2012. I was down with Dr. Shiguro from Central, and we were down in Selma, Alabama at the Education Summit.
Mhm.
And we were doing a presentation on the Common Core. Remember when the Common Core, the
Yeah.
new standards that will save our children, and they were going to save black, brown, special, they would save everyone. It was wonderful.
Hallelujah.
48 governors that signed on to it, and they were celebrated. So when I went down there, I had brought the whole language arts exemplary Common Core. Now let me tell you, that's like 5 telephone books.
Mm.
And I brought them down there with Dr. Shiguro, and we presented on it. And we used David Coleman. David Coleman is really the architect of the Common Core.
Mhm.
We used a lesson. He's not a teacher, but he decided he was going to teach a lesson modeling the Common Core. And his lesson was going to be on Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail.
Mm.
Now, in '63, I was on my grandfather's shoulders in D.C. I was there.
Mm.
So you have to know that I'm a student
Mhm.
of, of Letter from a Birmingham Jail. It is like, the Muhammad Ali knockout punch in
There
the
you go.
15th round. It took everyone on.
Mhm.
But so we showed it. And Selma, the Education Summit, isn't just experts, isn't just PhDs. It's parents, it's students, it's the community, it's principals, it's teachers, but it's a different community. And when I put up David Coleman doing his thing and showing his lesson, and then he made the key mistake that this community noticed. He said, now you have to disregard everything you know about the civil rights. And what we're going to focus on is the management style of Dr. King. Now, let me tell you, at that point, once we watched that and the audience erupted into what the heck is this? How do we forget Selma? Do we forget those bridge crossings? Do we forget Mississippi burning? Do we forget Rosa Parks on the bus? We forget all that stuff? What kind of standard is this? So what I'm saying is, not only is the testing driving a curriculum that is culturally irrelevant, racially insensitive, linguistically insensitive, it ignores the issues of poverty, and to me, it gives cover to the wealthy, the powerful, and the connected for never having done the right thing in public education in 170 years. I don't want to go back to the good old days. There were none.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Jesse Walkie Man Turner is my guest, and Jesse is the professor of literacy at Central Connecticut State University, and you can see why he has his doctorate in literacy, reading, and culture, and how those kind of disciplines intersect and also are applied and should be applied in terms of what we call pedagogy and learning and constructing an equitable educational system. Jesse, this is rich. This is rich. What do you want to go to? You reference how the high stakes testing kind of is really a code for labeling children for failure, not lifting them up. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. If we look at the history of standardized testing in America, it comes from the American eugenics movement.
Mm-hmm.
And what did the American eugenics movement do? They were liberals, progressives, who thought America couldn't compete economically in the world, and they were going to save America by somehow sterilizing 70,000 women, by somehow manipulating, lifting up the brightest of black communities, brown communities, women, the mentally ill, all this kinds of stuff. They actually were genetics, and Hitler recognized that.
Mm-hmm.
That's his formula.
He says he learned.
He
from
said,
us.
hey, I learned from the American
Mm-hmm.
eugenics movement, but that movement were creating assessments that were claimed to be objective, but were solely focused on a knowledge base that is valued by the wealthy, the powerful, and the connected. And get this, Tom, white guys like me.
And indeed, and you mentioned, and if folks are listening to the show and really are only hearing about the word eugenics or just hearing Jesse Walking Man Turner, his name for the first time, do your own research. Google the eugenics movement. There's an article I'll post about Yale White Man and God and how some of the eugenic movements forefathers kind of were professors here at Yale and kind of started the program in a way. So it's important for you just not to accept whole cloth what we're saying, but I'm urging you as you hear these words and themes and issues that Jesse's articulating, to do your own research, kind of chat with people, come to your own conclusions. We're just here to kind of really inspire, not necessarily to provoke, but really to inform and kind of share our perspective thus far in these very contentious and chaotic times. But your point's well taken. Some would say, Jesse, that in terms of the eugenics movement now with all the bioengineering and the ability to kind of program and DNA and kind of inject things into the egg and sperm kind of thing, that the white supremacist movement in a way is still continuing about how do you create this perfect person that might rule the world. I know I'm being somewhat rhetorical, but there is some thought in that regard.
We definitely, if we look at the curricula of our public schools, we have to realize they're not embracing immigrants. They're not embracing diversity. They're not embracing black and brown culture. They are not embracing the poor. What they are doing is selling a curricula that is structured to, it's sort of, if we go back to the history of American Indians, so my PhD took place on the Tohoto Reservation. It's a native reservation in Arizona. It's the second largest reservation in the nation. It's one of two that are on their original land. And what do we find out when we study American Indian education? The focus was to take the Indian out of the Indian. And I'll tell you, when I'm down in Selma at the Education Summit, every single year, we talk about the damage tracking is doing to children of color. But also, often the talks about how the same concept, we're taking the African out of the African. And so when we're testing children and they're taking these tests, if I don't see myself on the test, well, then I don't do well, because prior knowledge increases your comprehension. And I'll give you a researcher, Dr. Rudine Simmons Bishop. Dr. Rudine Bishop was a friend of Walter Dean Myers, one of the most phenomenal adolescent black authors in the nation. Walter's passed away, sadly. But Walter and Rudine Sims did her research focused on this aspect of comprehension for children of color. And she said that you need to have windows and mirrors. And when you have mirrors in the things that you read, your comprehension improves. And if you can have windows, then you can walk a mile in the shoes of another. Now, you see, that's what we should be embracing in our curriculum. Where are the mirrors? Every child should see himself on those tested materials or the curriculum in school. And every child should be able to walk in the footsteps of someone who's poor, someone who has special needs, someone who's brown, someone who's black, someone who's white, someone who doesn't speak English.
Even bring Harry in?
Bring Harry in, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ben Brown as well. You give me a clue there, Jesse, in terms of walking. So share with folks in terms of how the walking man kind of label has kind of, you've embraced it and embodied it and really brought it to life.
I'm an old civil rights activist, and you know, when you believe in justice, you have to know that's a battle you don't see a victory in. You hope. It's always Sam Cooke's, a change is going to come. You have this hope, but you do something. You do it. And so in 2010, I had realized 3 research studies had come back on No Child Left Behind. The first grade studies and 2 content area reading studies. In those 3 studies, the first grade studies, we had these reading first schools in the nation. Every city, every poor city, every impoverished community in the rural areas, anywhere, had one. Only one, because they only ever give you one. They don't give you everything. They give you one, but they decided that they had 5 golden Cadillac reading programs that were sure to make every child a reader by the 3rd grade and doing math and writing on grade level. Well, at the end of 6 years, they discovered something, that the only group that showed any growth in the 1st grade, in the 2nd grade, in the 3rd grade was the control group. And what is the control group? that's the group that doesn't get any of your programs.
Hmm.
They were the ones that just did what was before. We actually had a decline in reading comprehension in the reading first schools. That's why we don't have any more. So that's one study. I knew that under George Bush, that was the focus of his program. It would be like saying, I'm going to test a medicine and everyone died. You know, it's outrageous. So I knew then. And then Duncan came in and he decided, Arnie Duncan's. And Arnie Duncan is a product of No Child Left Behind. He could not be the superintendent of the Chicago Public Schools because he did not carry the background or the certification to do it. But Mayor Daley decided that, well, we're going to change that title to the Chief Financial Officer, and then we'll put Arnie Duncan in charge. But Duncan has a history in this stuff, so he proposed a reading across the content areas for 5th grade. Guess what? At the end of that study, it showed the control group was the only group that had growth. So all of his programs that he said were Gold Cadillac programs, they showed declines. Then he did it in the 6th grade because, you know, these people, you know, they don't understand. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes, you're out. And in the 6th grade, he did it again, and the same results came back. The very things that they had told schools they needed to do. This is the United States Department of Education, failed to show any growth in comprehension and the control group. So I had to walk, Tom, because I was at the State Department over here. I was writing, I was calling.
Not so quick. This is not walking around a block. This is walking from
Connecticut. At the first walk in 2010, I went from Central Connecticut State University because it's the 6th normal school in the nation. It's the first school, teachers college in Connecticut. I walked from there to D.C. Now, this walk was a listen.
We're not talking about Dixwell. We're talking about District of Columbia.
District of Columbia, 400 miles, 40 days, 10 miles a day, every day. And every day on that walk through Facebook and social media, I was asking to meet parents, to meet students, to meet teachers. And I did meet them. And they told me, parents told me, this testing in our schools is demoralizing and destroying my child's love of reading, my child's love of school. I heard the same from teachers. I heard the same from bilingual teachers, reading teachers. My reading and bilingual teacher said, we're not even teaching the kids anymore. At the beginning of the year, all we're doing is testing them. And I did it again in 2015 because, you see, I had hope that NCLB expired.
No Child Left
Behind. Yeah, No Child Left Behind expired. By the way, we spent $1.1 trillion on that, and we got absolutely nothing for it. So when we looked at it, when every Student Succeeds Act, and even the teachers' unions were happy about it, dancing, and they were celebrating this act because it said we're going to put the governors in charge, not the federal government. Now, if people remember, I said I'm a civil rights activist. The last thing you do is put the governors in charge. And so I walked again in 2015. I was the keynote speaker at the Badass Teachers Conference in D.C. Again, I walked and I talked to parents. I talked to one parent, Cindy Rose, whose son Ben has cerebral palsy, is missing half of his brain, cannot speak, has really almost no communicative skills. And his mother asked me, I was down in Baltimore, and she lived in Fredericksburg, which is a rural area in Maryland. And it was a little off the track, but she said, Walking Man, could you come see me? Could you come meet my son Ben? He's 10 years old, you've got to meet him. And I said, all right, I'll come meet you. And I went to the Fredericksburg Library, met her there, and I met this young man, and she showed me he can't read anything, can't understand anything, he can't write anything. I love him, he's beautiful. He had things in his IEP that said how to try to help to feed himself, to remember when he's supposed to eat, let people know when it's time to go to the bathroom. And why she asked me to come is because that school, she had signed an opt-out letter, do not test my son with these assessments. And what Fredericksburg did was they said her letter wasn't detailed enough. And so they put paint on his hands, and they used X's and O's and asked him questions that he could not respond to, and somehow touched these things to his hand. And his mother was ballistic. She's not the only one. Andrea Pratt Rudzinski from Florida Her son was dying in hospice care, and the Florida Commissioner of Education demanded that he be tested and demanded that his homebound teacher test him. This stuff is crazy. And his parents, the tears, the doctors fighting the state to say, no, this young man is dying, and her son is dead now.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Jesse Walking Man Turner is with us. Jesse, chat about so for the fight. How if folks want to kind of get involved, because I'm absolutely certain anyone that's listened thus far can understand your passion and your fervor for truth and justice, and they may even be tempted to join you. How should they reach out to you and contact you if they want to kind of lend their support financially, personally, resources, etc.?
Okay, you can find me on Facebook, Children of More Than Test Scores. That's the group I started for the first walk. It's an open group. I always say all I do is keep the lights on because you can post, you can share information, and you can learn a lot about what I'm doing and what other people are doing. It's important to know that this is not only happening in your local community.
Yes.
This is happening across the nation. You can also follow my blog, Children of More Than Test Scores, all together. And I blog on these issues every day. I wrote a blog for today, the Fight for Six blog, because this is the campaign that I've decided that I should launch. I'm an old little Bible kid, so, a little tune, give me some of that old time religion. So I'm like, give me some of that old 6 days of testing. Give me that old stuff, because we have to understand why 540 days versus 6 days. Now, Diane Ravitch gave us that answer. And Ravitch said there's only one reason for using standardized tests in our public schools, and that's because people are making money. And we have to understand that our publishing companies, what they're doing, there's over 600 million standardized tests given annually. This is a massive amount of money. And so what we have is campaign contributions going into both political parties. You got Democrats for education reform leading the way on testing, leading the way on choice schools. We haven't even gotten to that one. But this is about money. 540 days, 3 years of paying testing companies for information that I have not met one teacher that can tell me how they can use that information. I'm not really laughing. This is such a serious and sober discussion, but also so informative and I would dare say inspirational. You had mentioned, Jesse, also about the infrastructure, and you alluded to it in terms of the business, but you mentioned that change can't come by a system supported by property taxes. What's that all about? We're the only nation in the industrialized nations that uses property taxes to support our public schools. And I say that was set up with, maybe we might say it's the white supremacy, maybe we want to say it's the wealth supremacy, but it was definitely created so that the wealthy would always have better schools than the poor, than our immigrants, than our black and brown would always have. And also it was used so that we wouldn't have to spend what's needed to spend to meet the legal obligations of IDEA for our special education students. And make no mistake about it, Connecticut is in the midst of the CJEF case right now. Over here, we're one of 13 states who are being sued because we have not met our equity obligations. So CJEF is a case on that. And I'm disappointed in the last ruling because we had a Superior Court judge who turned around and started talking about adequate. You see, how come adequate is okay for black, brown, poor, and special education children? How come adequate is not okay for our most wealthy and our most powerful? So this is the stuff. You've got 13 states in these suits. You've got 49 out of 50 states spend more money on their wealthy schools than their poor schools. That's the Education Week 2015 Quality Counts report. I'm not making this stuff up.
Indeed.
So, this is what the data says. And meanwhile, I've got my political leaders sort of like with smoke and mirrors, like when you looked at, when Muhammad Ali used to fight, he used to do this wind up and twist his arm. And everybody would look at that arm and then boom, he smack you with a right jab to the face and take you out. That's what they're doing. They're smoke and mirrors. We got new standards. They need new standards. They need new tests. Well, this is like Marie Antoinette. This is the stuff like let them eat tests. This is the thing. Poverty in this nation is not an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
But poverty is something that is real.
Mm.
And if you want to help our public schools, you have to help our impoverished communities. And they're just not doing it. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm in my 60s now, but I almost feel like poverty, being poor, is almost being associated with being a choice. It's almost as if it is a label and you are guilty and you have committed a crime. Now that means something to me.
Indeed, that the victimization thing certainly kicks in. Talk a little bit, Jess, if you would, because you're involved. Help people can understand that you're involved with a personal energy, with a collective energy, with a structural kind of energy, with an organizational energy, and then also in terms of some standard organizations, the American University professors, you're involved with them.
Sure. I'm the secretary of the Central Connecticut State University AAUP chapter. And usually with my union stuff, I'm supportive and I step back because I'm involved in so many other activist things. But this year, I'm like, no, you step up. I can't ask people to walk. I can't ask people to stand on the line if I don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've decided that I need to stand up with my brothers and sisters who are being abused at universities, our full-time faculty members, our adjuncts. Let me give you a conversation why I did this. I had to run for the union office because we had a conversation at my home with some very good friends and faculty members who I love. And somehow it came up and said, we're dinosaurs. That we'll have tenure that they won't have. We're gonna have pensions they won't have. We're gonna have benefits they won't have. And somehow it was just there and I said, screw that. I'm not going to stand here and say that I've got mine and now forget about you. So I decided that I need to be more a union activist, and I'm ran on the stuff that, heck, the future for faculty needs to be one better. As a matter of fact, if we're not even looking at, we've got a board of regents that has not only raised tuition this year, but they've already announced they're raising it into 2020. They're talking about a consolidation, and a consolidation to where that would somehow put everything in a central office over there, and we lose our individual local identities for it. But how could you say because they call it Jerkian's piece is students first. Well, how do you put students first when every year you have raised their tuition?
Indeed.
The state of Connecticut went from 53% support for tuition in 2002 to 30% now. And trust me, our political leaders want to take that down. And every time the state decreases its support for universities, public universities in the state, that means your child, your nephews, your nieces, your grandchildren will pay more to attend our public universities.
Indeed. And thanks for sharing that. And you referenced also, Jesse, that there's an event taking place this month, May, in terms of your union and American University Professional Association.
This Wednesday at the Capitol Building, the Connecticut Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers and Central Connecticut's AAUP are going to Hartford, going to the Capitol Building at 5 o'clock. Come join us, people. Stand up. And we're saying, we keep your promises. Connecticut has a pension fund. They're 50th in the nation. And there's a crisis about to emerge because they have not made their contribution. But that's not the only thing. We're going to the Capitol because these people have made promises to provide the best possible public schools and public education system our state can have. They all run around saying, hey, I'm the education candidate. I love our public schools. I love our universities. And every time they come around, it's like, there's an old OJ song, beware of the handshake that sometimes hides the knife that's going to stick you in the back. Our legislators have constantly been allowing this governor, previous governors, to not decline, but to reduce our responsibility to public education, not only at the university, not only at K-12, early childhood. This is a disaster.
And I hope, folks, that you're following. We've covered so many really interconnected and also connected issues in terms of it, as Jesse's just mentioned. Jesse Walking Man Turner, from pre-K, from prenatal, from that standpoint, and into death. Life is about learning, and even the experience of living should be one about continual educational input. And so I'm really so pleased that he's kind of connected, and you can listen to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Jesse Walking Man Turner is with us, and Jesse is professor of literacy at Central Connecticut State University, and the doctorate in language, reading, and culture. So again, you can see whether you're in class, out of class, if you're on the planet, if you're in Connecticut, if you're a taxpayer, if you're a citizen of the earth, there's a lot for you to kind of tune into it and listen to. And Jesse's dropped some language on us and some topics that really are worth researching, and in your own mind, just kind of understanding what's going on in terms of this. Some people are using the term dystopia, Jesse, to kind of explain what's but we were talking also about being optimistic. So talk about optimism for a second.
All right. The optimism comes from people are waking up. We've had school choice policies. We haven't really talked about them much today. But what is school choice without equity?
We can talk about school choice.
I'm just saying. So I'm going to give you an example. Okay. In 2011, we're in Selma, and we put charter schools on trial. We put them on trial because Ben Jealous and the NAACP had passed a resolution saying that charter schools were not the answer to desegregation. Now, people only think about the moratorium that passed this summer, but they're missing the point that the NAACP had been aware of this for a number of years. But so we put them on trial, and it was interesting. We always do a mock trial in Selma. It's fantastic. We have real judges. We have real civil rights attorneys, and people play roles. I play roles. Everyone plays a role, and the audience and the courthouse is packed in Selma. It's like people are in the rafters, and so you present your case. And I remember that State Senator Sanders, who is an outstanding state senator, black Democratic state senator, but is an outstanding civil rights man, and he made this point. He said, "Now let me understand this piece, this choice that you're offering us. You're telling me that you can save 20% of our children in the ocean. Now I need to know, we have 100% of our children drowning. How the heck did you build a Titanic ship that only had enough for 20%? If you can't save them all, then you're not the person to come save us." And so this is the idea with school choice right now. You see, it's more eugenics. It's sort of like, well, we want to put, we're going to take certain people and put them in special schools and give them a little more and give them some more bells and whistles and exempt them from the rules. Could you imagine that? And then what we're going to do is we're going to save them. And you know what? We already have school choices, put our schools in a segregation mode that we have not seen since Brown versus the Board of Topeka. It is an outrage and a shame that I'm not, and some charter schools are good, but we got to ask those heads of those charter schools, how much money do you make? Who is your board? And who do you answer to? So the same, even magnet schools. My wife works at a Hartford magnet school. Even magnet schools. If the idea is that I'm going to give some extra help, then I need to ask myself a moral question. And that moral question has to be, how come I won't help all our children? So school choice right now, to me, is an immoral question. Because if you're not going to help all our schools, then you're an immoral person, and so is your policy.
Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Jesse Walking Man Turner is with us. Jesse, as we kind of wind down a little bit, for folks that might just be tuning in, how can they reach out to you again, learn more about you, hear more about you, to debate more with you? To say you're transparent is an understatement. You're transparent as well as authentic. So how can folks kind of reach out and touch and kind of engage in civil discourse with you?
Sure. One, you can find me on Facebook, and I'm one of those people on Facebook because when I did this, when I started the first walk, I decided that I don't take any money for speaking. I'm a state employee, so whatever I do for free over there. But you can find me on Facebook, Jesse Turner. You can find our Children Are More Than Test Scores group on Facebook. Both of them are public. I just don't allow any profanity, any pornography. I'll debate you, I'll discuss you on those places, no problem. It's not a debate, I think it's a discussion. It's intellectual discourse, it's what makes us good. And you could follow my blog. My blog addresses a number of issues, not only about public schools, but about race, about prejudice, about bigotry, about what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now.
Well, let's conclude as we wind down on what's going on in Washington. I know for myself, I have to still, in spite of November and in spite of January 20th, every morning, this is full disclosure, Jesse, I still got to wake up and remind myself that someone is in the White House, that I still can. So the cognitive dissonance, just the belief, I'm still battling within myself, understanding this reality. I watch TV, follow, but everyone has to kind of reach their own position about what the DC phenomenon means, if it means anything to them. What's your take, feeling, suggestion, comment in this regard? What's going on in America?
Well, we've had a shift in our politics, and I think maybe the Sanders campaign alluded to it a little. Money is free speech, and corporations are people. There is none of our Supreme Court justices on our early courts would have ever allowed that. How can a corporation be a person? Can they vote? How could money be free speech? Over there, what that means is I can buy anything. And we have had a massive privatization of everything, from our hospitals to our public schools to our parks. I mean, and Donald Trump, he's a businessman, said, it's all for sale, brother, every bit of it. And to look at his education policies, all we need to do is look at what he did last week. The DC vouchers, over $40 million goes to DC vouchers. Trump was over there, beautiful children. You can't fault parents of children for taking advantage of things, but you must look at the data. And on those schools in the DC, children that use vouchers to attend special schools, the data's in. Their literacy and math scores declined. They had lower scores than the schools they left behind. And what did Trump do? He said, hey, this is great. You know, I've got another $43 million to give for more vouchers. You see, Tom, if this was some program for a local program that was doing the best it could, doing little good deeds, that doesn't matter. What this is about is making money and using our public tax dollars for money. So Trump is crazy. I'll know that. But he's crazy like a fox, and realize that both political parties, we need a revolution to take back this tax-paying system. Companies are not people. Money is not free speech. You don't own our public schools. You don't own our hospitals. You don't own our libraries. You don't own anything. Actually, you benefit from them. That's the investment in the country.
So you'd consider yourself to be a patriot in this regard?
Very patriotic. Yes. I would. This is the new front. The new front. Young people are different. We saw that in the French election yesterday. They elected somebody who doesn't really have a party affiliation. They elected somebody nobody knew, but they elected him because he believed in the things they believed in. So I see the optimism is this man's not going to be around next time. Probably headed to the biggest loss of any presidential candidate ever. And if I were the GOP candidates with this healthcare bill, I'd be running for cover right now, because this is going to be the single biggest loss of GOP seats in election history in just 18 months' time.
Jesse, I want to let's wind down a little bit. I want to give you a chance to shift, not really a shift, but really in terms of the investment you made in terms of your personal life, your personal pocketbook, your personal energy, the wear and tear in your body. What do you say to, as we're in May and students are graduating from, could be from middle school, from high school, from college, and then for folks that are entering universities even in September, what's kind of your commencement? Again, let's keep in mind that commencement is really a new beginning or a beginning. What do you say to some folks that are just 16, 17, 18, 21, going to their graduate school in September? What do you say to them now as they kind of look out and enter into their world?
I say to my teachers, where's the humanity? And I say the humanity begins with you. I say advocacy begins with a pat on the back on a student, someone who needs a little help doing some work, a parent who comes to the door, a welcome. this is advocacy. I'm asking them, where's your advocacy? I'm an old little Bible kid, you know, and that passage where it says, I am not my brother's keeper. People don't follow that passage. What the passage is about is you are your brother's keeper. You are your sister's keeper. So my commencement speech is, we are each other's keepers. There is a public good, and you must fight for it, even if it's just a good morning to someone. That's advocacy. Every professional standard for an educator or a health professional, they have standards, and those standards demand that they advocate for children, to advocate for patients, to advocate for the sick, the elderly, the poor. This is our role, and I'm asking America, where's your humanity?
And to the 16-year-old or the high school graduates next month, June, that's graduated from Hillhouse High School or New Britain High School, what do you say to them?
I tell them, you know, Public Enemy used to have a little line, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. The future is going to be beautiful. The future is going to be people coming together like the young people in France, that you're going to elect new presidents, new congressmen, new governors. You're going to elect people without racial bias, without gender mix-ups. You're going to elect people who understand that we're in this together, and the public good matters, and that government should be for the public good, and we should all stand for the public good. That's what I say to them. Don't believe the hype. The world is yours. It's your oyster. Open it up just for you. And I love those people.
We've opened it up this morning, Jesse, thanks to you and thanks to Harry and WNHH and Paul Bass, kind of the progenitor of New Haven Independent and the radio station. We're really pleased to have you kind of bless us. And again, folks can find you how?
You can find me on Facebook. If you want to find me on the web, all you have to do is Google Dr. Jesse Turner. Google Jesse the Walking Man Turner. You're going to find me. I'm a public person. That's what it is. You can follow me on the web on Children Are More Than Test Scores all together, and you'll follow my blog, and you'll hear my commentations on my life, on the things that go around us. And by the way, I'm a member of Moral Mondays. I'm a member of Black Lives Matter. I'm a member of all the things that matter, because I am my brother's keeper, and he is mine, and we are our sister's keepers, and they are ours. And by the way, I was at that march in D.C., the Women's March. It was a beautiful moment.
Amen. Let's keep some more beautiful moments await, and more beautiful moments we can participate in. Jesse, again, a deep thank you to you for joining us. And Harry, thanks a lot. Talk to you next time.
Yeah, it's a big battle time. We gotta go. We're beginning to see the moratorium on charter schools with